today. My background is very much investment banks, brokers, MTFs, dark pools, as well as consulting. And most recently, I'm now an independent consultant in regulatory strategy, market structure, and regulatory strategy. So what we're going to go through is really kind of all the stages of fixed income electronic trading. So primary markets, pre-trade, trade, post-trade, market structure, and what the drivers are and synergies between equities and fixed income. My background is originally in equities, electronic trading. I brought Lehman Brothers from a voice-only environment to an electronic environment in the late 90s, early 2000s. And that was quite an interesting path. And now I see a lot of what happened in equities happening in fixed income, but definitely not the same. And I'll get into that a bit more. The drivers for see if this is working. The drivers for equities, early equities, electronic trading, really the buy side wanting more control, more informed decision making, and also technology advancements, order management systems, execution management systems, fixed protocol. That's really was driving equities, electronic trading. And it was actually the buy side and the sell side working together. And so it was created in a much more harmonious and kind of you give some, I'll give some, and that's how it evolved. Now it's a totally different thing. The drivers for electronic trading and fixed income are really regulations, regulations, regulations. So trying to prevent a market crisis that happened in 2008, 2009. And also really very, very important. My heel just went through the floor. Evidencing purposes in Dodd-Frank and MiFID II. That's very, very key. And then, of course, the regulations are having interesting consequences with balance sheet shrinkage, and that's really evident with the Basel III regulations. And all of this is driving electronic trading in fixed income. Now, to properly set the stage, I'm going to just touch on primary markets, even though we're mostly focusing on secondary. But really, in order to understand secondary and electronic trading, you have to understand primary markets in fixed income and how completely different they are from equities. And also to understand that primary markets are out of scope in MiFID II or any other regulation right now. So in equities, and you've heard some of this already. In equities, you have common shares, initial public offerings, and then you might have follow-on offerings, but they all have the same characteristics. In bonds, you have new issues, subsequent issues, but other subsequent issues can have separate maturities, separate interest rates, different coupons, different ratings. I mean, it's very much multiple moving parts. And this is why it's completely different to the equities market. So you're thinking, okay, well, there's a lack of structure. And that really does mean it's not conducive to electronic trading. Does this mean you shouldn't do it? You shouldn't have electronic trading? No, you have to do it. And quite frankly, you have to do it for evidencing the regulations requiring you to produce certain data. You have to do it for the regulatory purposes. There are synergies between equities and fixed income. But most interestingly, it's not the instrument, it's in the market structure. So the most important thing, I think, takeaway from the equities and fixed income markets is that it's not the equitization. Everyone's talking about the equitization of fixed income. It's not that. It is the market structure standardization of fixed income. So that's really, and once you have that context in mind, you can kind of see where the fixed income markets are evolving in regards to electronic trading. As you can see, they're equity instruments. this is based on an academic study in 2007. You had 9,000 listed equities, on average trades 400 a day, and fixed income instruments, 300,000 bonds, on average trading 1.5 per day. Now that's from an academic study in 2007. It's actually much larger than that now. So we are talking two totally separate beasts. Now, as I said, there are synergies between equities and fixed income, and that's happening in the market structure space, and very much driven by the regulation. So I'm going to have a lot of regulatory content in here. MiFID II is saying, right, whatever the deal is, you have to trade on a regulated market, an OTF, an MTF, or a systematic internalizer. And after 2017, those are the venues or platforms that you have to trade on. And that's the same thing in equities. There will be nuances, obviously, with fixed income. But this does exist today if you go out there and look. Now, anyone I have not mentioned up here, please do not take offense. This is just a sampling. So you have light marketplace, dark pools or anonymous trading platforms. Believe me, in equities, we rue the day that we named them dark pools. We thought it was a great name. And unfortunately, the regulators have really focused on this and think everything that happens in a dark pool is bad and nasty, which is ridiculous. And most of the buy sides here will agree that this is a very good, if you have a large block, this is a very good place to trade and not have market impact. Something I also think that's quite interesting is this sort of actionable IOIs in the fixed income space, really using kind of, not exactly, but kind of the algos and smart order routing logic that is available in the equity space to aggregate and facilitate the sourcing of liquidity. And I think we'll see a lot more of that. So again, it's borrowing the technology that's in the equity space and using that in fixed income. And then another one is, of course, FIX, starting to be seen more. FIX protocol, which is very much part of the equities world, being used in MTS and others at FIX 4.4. So I think that is also something we will see much more of as we go along. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to read all these regulations to you. Some of in MiFID II, they love to say calibration, and they're going to calibrate everything. So somehow, what's going on right now with the regulatory technical standards with ESMA in Paris, they're all calibrating everything so that fixed income will be fine. It won't be loaded with equities type demands, and it will all be fine. And they just kind of allude to it with calibration, an overused word in my view in MiFID II. Another one that they use is normal market size. Well, there is no normal market size in the fixed income world, but they use that throughout. So again, the equities language. We're all hoping that when they come out with the delegated acts and regulatory technical standards, that some sanity will come out of that and actually reflect much more market practitioners. One of the interesting things in the pre-trade world is that where there are waivers granted for pre-trade transparency, which is great. However, if you are trading in a dark pool, apparently the dark pool has to then provide an indicative pre-trade bid offer price. So if you have a large block sitting in a dark pool, the dark pool has to provide a indicative bid offer price, which defeats the whole purpose and gives you market impact. So a little wacky, and again, we're hoping that some sanity will prevail with the regulatory technical standards. And it's also something that the buy side really should talk to their lobbyists, or I'm not sure if they have lobbyists, but really should sort of, have some discussions about this in their best interest. Okay. Now, earlier, I showed you this screen. I'm going to go back a second. This one. And I have an asterisk next to broker crossing networks. And you're probably wondering, well, why is that? And the reason why is in 2017, when MiFID II comes into place, there's some very interesting language in MiFID, not in MiFIR, and MiFIR being the regulation, MiFID being the directive. But basically, if you were to take a broker crossing network as it stands today, and someone said, okay, I'm going to send an order to investment bank, and I'm going to, again, broker crossing network, or which in the future will be an organized trading facility, an OTF. You would send the order to them. They'd go, right, let's look for in the market for the other side. If it doesn't exist, then we'll use the balance sheet or the market maker, and that's how we'll execute. That's how it traditionally is. In 2017, there's a big problem with this, because when you have the OTF and then you smart order route to the market maker, that will actually be the systematic internalizer. And under MiFID II rules, which is why I wanted to bring this up, the two cannot be together in the same legal entity. So you cannot have an OTF route to a systematic internalizer or just a plain old broker crossing network routing to a market making desk in the same legal entity. So that's something that really needs to be addressed and focused on. And again, I'm hoping that, quite frankly, this in the regulatory technical standards just gets eliminated, because I think this will be a big problem if people have to go to an OTF at one bank and a market maker at the next. Or maybe that's how it will evolve. Again, don't worry, I'm not going to read all this. The main element in this regulatory page, and you all can read this later, is that investment firms are going to have to, for best execution purposes when they're trading, are going to have to list the top 5 execution venues annually. So this is going to be very interesting because everyone is going to be scrambling and very competitive to get onto the list because this will be published. So what we'll see, we think, is more firm prices and smaller bid-offer spreads. So I think yesterday Gianluca mentioned that dealers are going to, should stand behind their quoted prices in order to get onto this top 5 list. Obviously, in order to get on Gianluca's top 5 list, you're probably going to have to stand behind your prices. So I think this will mean smaller bid-offer spreads and more firm prices. Now, Posttrade, again, I'm not going to read you the MiFID II. It's very similar to what is in equities. You have to make public the price, volume, and time of the transactions as close to real time as technically possible. And there are deferred publication elements of MiFID II. But the main thing to concentrate on in the post-trade world is data, data, data. Everything is about gathering, storing, monitoring, and reporting. Reference data will become incredibly important, master databases, and then we'll see how efficient and effective trading performance can be, hopefully through TCA. But I think what we'll have to do is see really the outcome of the reporting of this data, and then to see if we can pull from that proper TCA information so that we can have performance measurement and get something similar that is in equities. If you all are familiar with transaction cost analysis, which is widely used in the equities world and is now even being used in the pre-trade space for cost expectation. So, as I've said, it's market standardization, market structure standardization of fixed income, not equitization. And I think it's quite interesting. If you go back, I went and found some old documents back in sort of the old days of equities. And here's a list, and not even all of them, but here's a list of some of the, in 2002, some of the execution and or liquidity venues. And there are about 20 of them. If you look, there are about 8 that are in existence today, the last 4 of which are broker crossing networks. Now, there are obviously a lot more broker crossing networks. I couldn't list them all. But you get an idea that certainly survival of the fittest happened in the 10 or 12 years of electronic trading, and we're at the beginning of this in fixed income. And here's a list of some of them. Apparently there are about, I've been told there are 32 liquidity or execution venues in the fixed income space. And it'll be interesting to see in 10 or 12 years which names that are here will be there. So lastly, there are similarities between the evolutionary cycle of equities and fixed income, but it's definitely not exactly. Like, you cannot just take equities in the market and plunk it into the fixed income space, no matter what the regulators think. So, but and I see I'm getting told that my time is done. So the areas that I think will have the Darwinian approach is really, obviously, the equity and liquidity sourcing venues, as we've just seen, technology, because that's emerging as we speak, and also, and I think we can discuss this more in the panel, skill sets, because the people who do the job, their skill sets will change. So if there are any questions, I can take them, but we also have a panel coming up afterwards. But if there are any questions, I can take them right now. This is bad for heels.
Okay. Sorry, are there any questions? Whilst you think of that, if I can ask Gianluca, Chris, Richard, and Hubert, Liz, if you take a seat as well. Okay. Whilst they're coming up onto the stage, first of all, thank you very much, Liz. Big round of applause for her presentation. Thank you very much.